it's sometimes hard to talk about these types of things because it is so broad. You know, there's so many things that you can do. Uh,
Right.
and it's sometimes hard for people to conceptualize it because um, yeah, I don't know if you've ever been in a conversation with somebody where you're talking about something like a Swiss Army knife, right? With like all the tools on it. And they're like, well, what can it do? And
Right.
well,
Right.
what do you want it to do? Right? Like what are your use cases? You know, do you need to open up a bottle? Do you need to open up a wine bottle? I got a corkscrew on this thing, right? Like I got so many things that this thing can do. Like, what do you actually want to use it for?
Hey there, and welcome to the automation conversation where Nick Hughes and myself talk about using the power of automation to really have a massive impact on your company's overall defense strategy. As I mentioned, I'm here with Nick Hughes. Nick's the CEO of EITR Technologies, and I can tell you unequivocally, Nick is on a mission to make the world a better place through automation. And maybe we just start with Nick. Give me a little quick overview of EITR and the kinds of work you do.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. Um, so at EITR, we really focus on automation, but more specifically, the use cases of automation that touch cloud systems and cybersecurity. With cybersecurity having such broad applications, right? Like it could be cybersecurity on premise or in cloud, or having to do with software development, or there's so many areas of cybersecurity where automation could be valuable.
So let's just start with the general question about people who aren't tapping into automation, specifically around cybersecurity. Like, what are people doing today?
Um, so there are some areas where folks are starting to use automation more in their day-to-day cybersecurity operations. Um, but you still often find a lot of shops that are implementing manual processes, and I think that's really reflective in the job postings that you see, and a lot of the data that we're currently seeing in the industry, where there's X number of hundreds of thousands of open cybersecurity roles, and there's a shortage of cybersecurity professionals and things like that. Um, I think that with some of the things uh, in cybersecurity, people still view it as a people problem, right? Like we need more people in order to execute the ever changing and dynamic landscape of cybersecurity. When in reality, like there's probably some number of things that we could automate, um, whether they're difficult or not, right? Like if we were able to automate those things, then we have less of a need for people. And I think that's good for everyone, right? Um, we can eliminate some of the low value type of uh, jobs or tasks within job roles, and allow those same people who are currently overworked and overburdened with all of this stuff to do in cybersecurity, and allow them to focus more on high value tasks, more strategic thinking, um, be more responsive to things that are actual problems. So I think there's a good story to be told around the use of automation in the industry as a whole.
Right. So, one of the things we wanted to dig in today is specific examples and use cases. And we thought we'd start by talking about threat intelligence and, things we can do around automating threat intelligence. You know, for people who are currently doing things manually, how can, threat automation or threat intelligence automation, start to make a difference?
Well, I guess it's important to sort of be on the same page as to what threat intelligence is, right? Um, from my perspective, uh, it, it's somewhat broad, but it's ultimately a data problem, right? Threat
Right.
intelligence is the data that allows you to um, be informed as to when certain activities could be threats within your network or external to your network. Um, so threat intelligence is really just a fancy term for, hey, we have a bunch of data sources that are related to bad things that are going on uh,
Right.
on computer systems all over the world, and we're sharing that data with you so that you can better protect your systems, right? So the there's a lot of software, I guess, that does different cybersecurity functions. Um, and each one of those pieces of software might have some way to ingest threat intelligence data. Um, but thinking of it as like maybe a scaling problem, right? If you have n number of different applications and they're all able to pull in threat intelligence uniquely, uh, you don't have a single point at which you can pull in that data and distribute it, right? So each one may or may not have that functionality as well. Some of them might be relying upon you for providing that data somewhere for it to ingest locally. So, you know, threat intelligence and how to automate it is an interesting problem because it's so dynamic, right? But like ultimately, we need to start thinking of it less as this is a uniquely cybersecurity specific problem because ultimately it's a data ingest problem, right?
Right.
This could be the same type of problem that you might encounter uh, in doing data analysis or some other big data type of problem.
Gotcha. So, okay. So what I'm hearing is we're ingesting all this information that's fairly dynamic out there. What are some of the things people are doing with that information to help, elevate their security posture through automation?
Yeah, so once you have the threat intelligence data in your organization, the sky's the limit as to what you can do with it, right? As I said, there's tool sets that people are using currently. Maybe they're endpoint detection response pieces of software, right? Like the little agents that sit on all of your servers and laptops and things within your organization that say when bad things are happening. Maybe you could facilitate the distribution of the threat intelligence data to those endpoints or the head end um, that controls those systems. And then at that point, you know when bad things are happening on your system. You have relevant hash data for malicious software. Maybe in the case of um, firewalls external to your system, bad IPs. You know that this particular IP is being used by a bad actor. Then you can go ahead and just drop that traffic right before it even gets to the point where it could overwhelm your systems. So there's definitely a lot of use cases, and it's sometimes hard to talk about these types of things because it is so broad. There's so many things that you can do. Uh,
Right.
and it's sometimes hard for people to conceptualize it because yeah, I don't know if you've ever been in a conversation with somebody where you're talking about something like a Swiss Army knife, right? With like all the tools on it, and they're like, well, what can it do? And
Right.
well,
Right.
what do you want it to do, right? Like, what are your use cases? Do you need to open up a bottle? Do you need to open up a wine bottle? I got a corkscrew on this thing, right? Like, I got so many things that this thing can do. Like, what do you actually want to use it for?
Right.
And so it's almost like when you have these conversations, you need to have a really deep dive on, hey, what does your environment look like right now? What tools are you using? Where do you see gaps within your environment? Let's look at all of the things in the architecture and how things fit together. and let's see if I can see any particular gaps and evaluate those, right? Like, there's so many things to think about. um, it's really helpful when you've been through it over and over and over again, because you know all of those things to look for.
Right, right. The so the maybe just talk a little bit about the landscape of threat intelligent automation. Is are there tools out there, and what are the different approaches to threat intelligence automation? And I'm assuming there's manual some spectrum on the manual to ultra custom. Talk to me a little bit about how are people trying to solve these problems through automation?
Yeah. So as I said, sometimes other tools have a capability built into them to be able to pull in threat intelligence information. Maybe the company that sells that piece of software gathers up information, aggregates it, put it in a certain format for you, and it's just responsible for downloading that. Um, there's open source technologies that you can leverage in order to solve the data problem, right? Like ETL software is great for this. Uh,
Right.
you know, ETL being extract, transform, and load for anybody who's not like a data nerd.
Right.
Um, but you know, what I've seen in the past with people using that type of technology is often they have like a data lake or something of that nature, where they have a lot of security relevant data that are coming in through different feeds. They're putting log data on like a big shared file system or in S3 buckets, or they're taking in um, near real time streaming data of some sort, maybe like NetFlow or some other type of data, and sort of parsing through that as it comes in. And then this threat intelligence automation process is then responsible, like I said, for gathering up all of the stuff that points to bad things. And then you have analysis operations that are running and using that as a source in order to say, like, oh, I found this thing over here, right? Um, so there's a lot of different ways to solve this problem.
Right.
Uh, but a lot of times you don't really see something that is packaged as, here is uh, our solution for the myriad of inputs and outputs to do things, right?
Right.
So, taking it back to, a standard computer problem, right? Like, anybody who's come through like computer science or other computer relevant, training or education programs, it's like that input processing and output diagram that was like the very beginning of your computer classes, right?
Right.
And that's really what these types of applications solve for, is I have inputs that I need data from. I have outputs that I need to send data to. And then maybe there's some sort of processing or transformation process that happens in the middle in order to do things to the incoming data to make sure that it's in the right output format for all of the output systems. Um,
Got it. Where,
and
in terms of the inputs, Nick, what are all the sources for, where you're gathering the initial intelligence?
that's a really good question. And yet again, it's wow, that's a really good topic that we could talk on for like 5 or 6 hours, right?
Next
So
session. Yeah.
there are various online sources that can be pulled in. There's a lot of like free and open source, like DNS names, IP addresses, malicious file hashes, things like that, that are all over the place. Sometimes you can just get to them and download them. Sometimes you need to sign up for the service. but you can still access that API with like the free credentials or whatever, pull down some stuff. A lot of those sources you can also pay for as well, in order to maybe get enriched um, data from a bunch of different types of sources, all from a single place. Uh, so there's definitely a lot of sources that you can find out there in the
Right.
world. But then sometimes there's also internal sources that you can use, maybe within your organization. Um, you know of some things that maybe aren't known by the rest of the world, and you want to ingest those as well. It might be the output of some other process, whether it be um, the um, dang it, Bruce.
Sorry.
I'm
It
gonna
is
blame you
it
every
is
time I lose my train of thought.
it is
But
Wednesday. So
um, but essentially, like, if you have some sort organization that is looking for threats, like threat hunt within your organization, and they have some sort of output from that process, we can then ingest that into some sort of data processing system that can then look for that same issue or threat within the broader organization.
right, okay.
So the sky's the limit when it comes to the inputs and outputs, really. When it comes to the transformations, it's really relying upon what the input systems give you and what the output systems desire.
Right, okay.
So, maybe that's like data type transformation. You pull something in JSON, and uh, you need to pull out specific values because the output system is just expecting a flat text file of a list of IPs or something like that.
Right.
Um, so, a lot of times it's data format transformation, but it could be anything.
Right, okay. So, I mean, it leads into, I know you and I have talked about this before, just as, okay, how do you take these very complex systems and bring them to, smaller or medium-sized businesses and, give them this, take advantage of some of these more robust solutions that, free up people's times, et cetera. And I know you've kind of developed something that we'll call it's mostly in a box, but it allows for a high degree of customization. You're calling it Sentry Stream, which I love. You maybe talk a little bit about how that fits and what is Sentry Stream and what can you do with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you hit the nail on the head in the question. So I'll just restructure that.
I was going to say, was there actually a question in there?
uh, it's the packaging of the capability that we've been discussing, um, in a way that like small to medium sized businesses can say, I need this thing, right? Um, it's our way of putting a little like circle around the thing and say like, okay, here's the general need fulfilling thing, right? Like a system that can handle taking inputs, processing them, and outputs, and then we work with you in order to figure out what your environment's like, what your needs are, what systems do you work with, what things can we pull in order to fulfill this need of providing fast information access for those critical cybersecurity systems within your organization. So Sentry Stream, which is maybe
Got three
maybe I
times
went too
fast.
hard on the alliteration there. Like maybe I should have thought of a different name that wasn't two S's in a row, because
That's right.
clearly I can't say it. But Sentry Stream is that um, combination of a product and bespoke uh, services implementation surrounding it, saying like, hey, we have this framework, and we're going to tailor it for what your needs are, all for this, you know, package. So, for one price, you're looking at, I can walk away with this thing that is a critical need in cybersecurity.
Right. So it's, I'm visualizing there's the inputs, the transformation, and the outputs. That's the structure. We can, what's your problem? We'll figure out how to optimize this. And we can, build that in, let's call it 2 or 3 weeks. And the fixed price is $7,500 for the structure with the customization around it. And it makes it really easy for somebody to go in and know, okay, I'm going to solve this problem for $7,500, and I'm spending $80,000 doing it manually. So the solutions there and the ROI is really clear on it. The kind of tell me a little bit about just the scoping process, and how do you kind of get into it?
Well, Bruce, I'm a simple man, and
Simple but
all
not easy, right? Simple but not easy.
what it really boils down to is having conversations, right?
Right,
You know, uh, I like to focus on automation in what we do, and essentially, it's a technical solution, right? Automating processes means that we are implementing some sort of technical solution, but I say this over and over again, almost in every interview. So hopefully at some point it'll sort of like sink in as being this thing that I always talk about. But essentially, this is all about people, right? So having a conversation with a person is something that is critical to implementing any good solution, because you need to know what the needs are. You can't just waltz in someplace with something right off the shelf and
right,
say, here you go, you're fixed, right? Like every system is different. A lot of them have the same components, a lot of
right,
them have similar architectures, but there's always going to be some difference. So having high level conversations about how things fit together, what the needs of the organization might be, what the future strategies of the organization, like what tool sets and architecture do they want to go to in the future.
right,
Uh, those are all really key. And then you have the lower level conversations with the boots on the ground, where these are maybe the people that are doing the manual processes today. Here's what I do. Here's the places that I go to. Here's the systems that I loaded into. Um, Seeing what those look like, that's important. Talking to the people that deal with each one of those systems is potentially important. So, they don't have to be lengthy conversations, right? But like
right,
having conversations with the people involved in all parts of the process, as it stands today, and the people doing the planning for tomorrow, is really critical to doing anything right, whether it's Sentry Stream or anything.
right, right. Yeah, it's so I mean, my takeaway on that is the structure's there with a conversation, at least within the structure, the customer knows there's a structure in place, a solution that can be done within a fixed amount of time, and will solve a specific problem. But all it really takes is an initial conversation. Say, how do you best leverage the structure we've got in place, and move forward? So I think
Yeah.
it's really cool what you're doing, because there's this, it's sort of this amazing middle ground that you're creating, which is, you eliminate things like scope creep and ambiguity, and buying a piece of software that you've got to navigate customization through, and can kind of become a bottomless pit from a financial perspective. So I think what you're doing is really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. You often hear the phrase that ideas are cheap and execution is really what matters.
Right,
And I think that's kind of what we're discussing here, right? There's lots of ways to do the things that we're packaging up as Sentry Stream.
right,
Um, you can solve this problem other ways. But what we've done is create a process that is real easy to draw a circle around, right? Like the scope is well defined. What you're going to get into. Sometimes with working with other consultants, they can solve this problem, but how long is it going to take them?
Right.
How much money is it going to take them? This is one of those problems that not a lot of people like to solve for a small dollar amount, because it can get out of hand real quick,
Right.
and that means more money for them. So with EITR trying to be helpful above all else, um, that's really what we've kind of settled on, is like, how can we solve this problem for folks in a way that makes it uh, ideal for them, right? Like,
Right.
not how can we uh, suck the most money out of
Right.
organizations, right? Like, how can we fix this problem for the most amount of people in a way that's ideal for them?
Yeah, I'll say one thing I've come to appreciate about you is you just separate the wheat from the chaff, very pragmatic, solve the problem, and that's really how you grow and build a business is be outcomes focused. So I think what you've got here is really cool. And whether it's just about SentryStream or anything related to threat intelligence and automation, any automation questions, I know you're more than welcome to answer questions and are pretty good at just being a professional sounding board on some of these things. So if we'll put Nick's contact information up there, but I really encourage you to reach out if you've got any questions related to automation. And then just wrapping up, we hope you found this conversation useful, and we touched on threat intelligence. If you want us to cover any other aspects of automation around cybersecurity, be happy to do that. Just drop a note in the comments or shoot us an email at info@eitr.tech. Or you can connect with us through the EITR Technologies page on LinkedIn. So thanks, Nick, for your time. I appreciate it. And get out there and automate that stuff. All the things, as you love to say, automate the things, right?
Thanks, Bruce. I love you
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. Thanks, Nick. Bye-bye.
Bye. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you want to see more from EITR, just hit like and subscribe.